Hi there, my name is Nana Ankrahene, and today's webinar is titled How to Help Your Child Master Multiplication Facts. So let's jump right in. So as I said, I'm Nana Ankrahene. I'm a math teacher and tutor. I teach middle school math for grades 5 to 8. I'm also a K to 12 math tutor. I majored in economics and math at Holyoke College, and I'm a math competitions enthusiast. In general, I love math. So that's my background. All right, the first thing I want to discuss is whether or not memorizing multiplication facts is truly important. It's really important. So I would say yes, it is important that kids memorize multiplication facts. Some people think that because we now have calculators and things like that, it's not as essential as it used to be. And I still believe that it is. Now, the first reason is that multiplication is an essential part of arithmetic and algebra. We use it throughout math a lot. And because students are coming into contact with these multiplication facts over and over again, it's important that they memorize them. This will help them to sort of use their existing brain space, if you will, for other more complex topics, right? If you're working on ratios or you're working on adding and subtracting fractions with different denominators, or even in algebra, if you're working on um, factoring polynomials, for instance, you don't want to use your time trying to recall facts that should already be coming naturally to you, right? What you want to do is to focus your energy and your mental capacity on the work at hand, the concepts that you're working on. So actually memorizing the facts will help you to have an easier time when you're working on more advanced. The second thing is that memorizing multiplication facts really facilitates mental math. And I know that my students especially love mental math. If they can do something in their heads, 100% for them, they love that. They prefer that to having to write everything down, right? And in some ways, you want to encourage mental math. It makes math fun. It helps with conceptual understanding as well. If you can do something in your head, you can really think about it. It allows for deeper um, engagement with the mathematics material. And so I think mental math is a great thing and we want to boost it. And when you have your multiplication facts down, you can kind of work on mental math. An example would be if you're working on a word problem and you had to multiply something. If the facts came naturally to you, it would facilitate your thinking on the topic because it wouldn't be a problem for you. But if you didn't know the facts, for instance, if you had to think of 9 times 5, again, just like I said the first time, your energy is spent trying to figure out the multiplication rather than just going into the more deeper understanding. And so it's great for mental math. And I will give an example as we go on in this webinar of how it could help with mental math. The third thing I would say is that memorizing multiplication facts, it really boosts student confidence, 100%. My kids get so excited when they know their multiplication facts. So they call me Mrs. N, right? Mrs. N, I did this. I learned the sevens. I learned the eights. Mrs. N, one child even learned the 13s and was excited to tell me. It boosts their confidence. It gives them a quick win. Like math can be challenging for some students, and memorizing multiplication facts gives them confidence that they can do math, which is a good thing. We want to boost that confidence. So hopefully you agree with me that memorizing multiplication facts is important. We don't want them to rely on calculators, the math that doesn't become as intuitive when they do that. And so this is a great thing to do. So if you agree with me, then let's talk about how we can make this happen. So the next thing that we're going to do is say, how can we help our children to master multiplication facts? How can we do it? So I've broken this up into three things, three main topics. The first one is that we should help them memorize the facts. The second one, after they've memorized the facts, they need to retain the facts long term. And the third thing they need to do is they need to use the facts. And that's going to facilitate the retention. If they're using it constantly, they're going back into their memory and recalling and using it, that's going to facilitate the retention of the facts. All right, so let's talk about memorizing facts. What are some tools? What are things that we can do to help them? So we can help them with these tools. The first one is recitation, and this is how I learned my multiplication facts. When I was younger in Ghana, we had primary school, right? We would have to recite the multiplication facts. So we'd go to school, and our teacher would kind of lead us, and we would start. It was as simple as we would say 212, 224, 236, 248, 2510, 2612, and so on. And we would repeat it over and over again almost every single day. And it stuck. We were doing it together, so it wasn't boring and it worked. So it's as simple as that. Through constant repetition and recitation and repetition, students will learn their multiplication facts. Another thing that they could do, and this is super cool that I wish I had this, is through songs. We have YouTube now, and we have so many resources available to us. And I'll show you in the next slide what I mean by that. But singing, if they can sing a song that would help them to memorize the facts, that would be great. Another thing would be to do number lines and skip counting. So number lines help with skip counting. So when I say skip counting, all I mean, I'm sure most people know what skip counting is, but it's just like skipping by the number that you're counting by. So for instance, twos, it would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then threes would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on, right? So just repeating that, continuing to skip count so that it becomes intuitive, they know when they hear a number, they know whether it's part of the three times table or is not part of the three times table because they're used to skip counting. Or they can just quickly recall it because they've done it multiple times. So number lines help with that because you can visually see the numbers on the number line, so that helps. The third thing I would say, the fourth thing would be review and recall. So when I say review and recall, what I mean is actually writing the facts down and just consistently doing that. So, for instance, somebody can take a sheet of paper and start 2 times 1 is equals 2, 2 times 2 equals 4, 2 times 3 equals 6, 2 times 4 equals, and just continue to do that. So this can go along with some of the others, like after you've learned recitation and songs and number lines, you can just do that review, just writing it over and over again until it sticks. It actually really helps. Writing something down actually boosts the memory. So if you're consistently recalling that, it helps. So just writing it through and then doing that multiple times. The next thing I would say is through stories and images. And there's a resource called Times Tales that is becoming increasingly popular. And from all that I've heard, I haven't personally used it, but from all that I've heard, it's super effective. It's actually one of the things on my list to try out with my students. The last thing I would say is online resources like Math Fact Lab. Math Fact Lab is amazing. It just allows you to constantly practice these math facts and to learn them and to actually practice them for longer term retention. So we'll talk a little bit more about that website. Okay, so I want to talk a bit more about some of the points that I raised. So one of the examples that I gave for helping to actually memorize the facts was through songs. So they're catchy songs on YouTube. All I did was go on YouTube and I typed in times table songs. And you can even see I spelled songs wrong over there, but I found some really catchy ones and I even started singing them, singing along. So there's one that's learn multiplication songs for children, times tables, multiply numbers 1 to 12 for kids by Patty Shukra. And I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that well. Um, it was great. I was watching that and singing along. It was actually quite fun and catchy. Something like that would be really effective. Another one is times table songs 1 to 12 for kids, 23-minute compilation from silly school songs. So both of these examples that I'm giving you here go from 1 to 12. They do everything. So they're great resources. In fact, the second one even teaches you like strategies as they're singing the song, which is super cool. So something like this, you can just play it at home for your kids because when we hear music in the background, sometimes we end up like just even memorizing the lyrics, right? So this is something that you can play, something that you can sing together, use it to sing and dance, make it a cool activity. It would be great for just memorizing those facts, getting them stuck in their heads. All right, let's go on to the next resource. Times tables. Now this is from all accounts, it's amazing. I've only read great reviews about this resource. It's basically like using this unique approach of storytelling to help kids memorize their multiplication facts. If you look at that picture on the screen to the left, right here, there's like a tree of sorts, and then the number four, and then it's some kind of story that's relating, um, I think, a multiplication factor of 4 times 9 to 36. I think it has to do with the kite and the kite numbers and the balloons that you see there, but it's just a memorization thing. When the kids hear the stories and they see the visual images, and the stories stick in their head, they're able to make that connection of the facts to the answer. It's super cool. And on the website, they say that most students achieve mastery in 2 weeks or less, which is really amazing. Again, I haven't tried it myself, and it's one of the things on my to-do list to try, but it's super promising. And I mean, it's from all indications, it would work. So I would definitely encourage um, you to try it if your child would benefit from this style of memorization. All right. So let's look at the next resource, Math Fact Lab. This is something that I have tried myself, and I think it's really, really cool. Right now, I have my fifth graders and my sixth graders because some of them, or most of them, haven't fully memorized their multiplication facts. And so I've created accounts for all of them, and I can track their progress. I can see how much time they're spending on it. I can see what level they're on. Now, the way that Math Fact Lab works is that it starts with a placement test. You take a placement test, and then they'll put you on a level. So level A might be like maybe the two times table or something like that, and then it goes all the way down by with the alphabet. And it's not just the 1 to 12, it goes past that. Even one of my kids is even on the 19 times table, and he keeps going. He likes it, and he's still going, which is amazing to me. And if you look at the screen right here, they use different images to teach the math facts. So they can use like sort of like an area thing, like with the 7 and 6. So they have those dots there. So 7 times 6 is 42. So even when the student is learning it, they have these aids, kind of these visual pictures that they can use to figure out the facts. But they do it constantly over time, and then the facts stick. They have number lines that they use as well. There's just different visual things that go with the problems that make it very, very easy. And I also like it because they also have division practice as well. So as you're doing multiplication, you're also doing division, and you're connecting the two. Sometimes students do not make that connection, and this resource allows them to make that connection. Now, they also have subtraction and addition math facts mastery as well. So it's kind of two modes. You can also use that if you have a child who needs to master addition and subtraction. Math Fact Lab also works. So great option. I love it, and it's been great for me so far. Okay. The next thing I would say is retaining the multiplication fact. So we've talked about actually memorizing the facts. The next aspect is we need them to retain it long term, not just memorize it and lose it, but to keep it. And the key to this is spaced review or repetition. What I mean by that is that you want them to continue to review it, to repeat what they've learned, but you want that over time, and you want space in between. So, like, if they learn something today, let's say they memorize the twos today, tomorrow practice it. Maybe it's 2 days from then practice it again. Maybe 3 days, 4 days, and continue to increase the space, uh, the days between which you practice, but do it long term. So maybe go like a week, and then go back and see if they remember, and then maybe 2 weeks, and then maybe 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, that kind of thing. What that's going to do is that because you're constantly going back and recalling, it really facilitates the long-term memorization piece. Um, and the retention piece. So it's harder to lose something that you have kind of built up that recall over time. So that's the trick here. Um, another thing that you could do is to use multiplication flashcards, right? Maybe you're at home, maybe it's a Friday night, it's chill. You can play a game with those multiplication flashcards, or maybe before dinner or something like that. Just something really quick. You give them a few cards, and they're just supposed to kind of shout out the answer or something like that, something quick. One thing I like a lot, because my kids do like going online and like using different resources online. So that's an added, it motivates them to to practice their multiplication facts. But I also enjoy online. I do online tutoring and I just enjoy online options. I use gimkit.com for like a game-based system of doing it, and I'll explain that later. I use Timetables Rockstars and I use Online Jeopardy as well. Okay, so I want to talk about GimKit. So GimKit is amazing. Now it was designed by a student and it's completely game-based where students practice things that they've learned in school, but in a game. So if you look at the picture here, one of the examples, one of the ones that my kids like is Don't Look Down. Now that one, it's just like a video game, but to be able to move in that video game, to get energy, you need to answer questions. So I can set my own questions, or I can use some of the questions that other teachers have set on GimKit, and the kids just go in and I put those questions, I set them, make it live, and the kids start competing with each other. And it's super cool. They love it. In fact, every single morning to the point where it's like driving me crazy now. It's like, Mrs. N, can we practice GimKit? They love it so much. And so that's GimKit. It's great for multiplication facts. I like the classic mode as well. There they can earn money and they can use their money to buy like multipliers to multiply their money, or I think there's also like ways to bring somebody else down or something like that. It can get crazy, but it's super fun and it's a great way to help them to practice it for long-term retention. Um, okay, so that's GimKit. The next one I want to talk about is Jeopardy Labs. As you can see, Jeopardy Labs is, so GimKit is paid. I forgot to say that GimKit is paid. There's a free option that limits the number of people. So if you only have a few kiddos, go ahead and use GimKit. It's free for if you don't have a lot of kiddos. I had more kiddos, and so I ended up paying for it, but it wasn't very expensive. Jeopardy Labs is completely free, and you're basically playing Jeopardy but online. And there's tons. You don't even have to create your own game because there's so many multiplication games on Jeopardy Labs and other games as well. So you can just look for times tables or multiplication facts or whatever, and then play that game with your kids. It's super easy to use. You can also set your own questions. You can create your own game and share it. You don't really need, I have like a premium account or something, but it was like, I think it was a lifetime $20 fee or something like that. But that only allowed me to put like equations in there with the formulas and stuff like that, but you don't need that. It's a great resource and it's free. Okay, Times Table Rockstar. So this is a cool website where kids can kind of practice their multiplication facts. It's affordable. They can be timed where the question will skip if they miss it and things like that. So that's cool. There's this guitar-like thing that goes up each time they go up each time they answer questions, so they can see their progress. Other students from all over the world are also using this, and so sometimes you can see information about that and like how they're doing and things like that. So it's super cool. It's fun. My students like it. And you can do multiplication and division. So it's really cool. So these are, I gave you examples of things that you can do to help once they've memorized it to just retain it, right? To keep bringing it back, keep recalling it so they can keep it long term. The last thing is the multiplication trainer. It's on mathisfun.com. You can Google multiplication trainer, math is fun, and it will lead you right to it. It's free, it works. You can set off like a cutoff time, question cutoff, the number of times. You can pick the type of table that you don't have to do all the facts at once. You can do maybe the 6 times table or the 7 like that. It allows you to choose that, and it's 100% free. And I've used it with one of my students and it worked like a charm. So I would also recommend this. All right. The last piece of it was using the multiplication facts. So we've talked about memorizing the facts, we talked about retaining the facts, and now we're going to talk about using the facts. So we use multiplication in everyday life, right? That's my first point. Use it in everyday life so that it allows for longer term retention. The next thing is to use multiplication in other areas of math, like geometry. For instance, area. Like area questions are 100% multiplication questions, right? So kind of mix it up. Instead of maybe giving them straight multiplication problems, you can make it into area problems or things like that. That's going to make it, it's going to vary it, but it's still going to test whether they understand the material. Or instead of giving them, let's say 5 times 4, give them a 5 by 4 kind of 5 by 4, 5 objects by 4 objects thing, and then ask them how many objects there are. That is multiplication, but it's a different form of it. It makes it less boring and it helps you to really see if they're applying what they're learning. All right, the next thing is to solve multiplication related word problems. So again, if they've really mastered the multiplication facts, then they should be able to use that to solve word problems. So if you can test that, if they're able to do that, then you can have confidence that they really know what they're doing. The last one is to use the basic multiplication facts and the distributive property to solve more difficult multiplication problems. And we will talk about that in maybe the next 2 slides. All right. So I wanted to talk about the everyday life application, the real life application. Now, grocery shopping. This comes up if you go grocery shopping. You can ask them to help you, one, figure out the total cost, maybe estimate. For instance, if they're selling three, I like to buy plantains when I go to a grocery store, and usually you can get plantains for like 3 for $2 or something like that, or less, 3 for $1 or something like that. So let's say if I got 3 for $2, and I wanted to say something like, how much would I have to pay if I wanted to get um maybe 9 plantains, right? If I wanted to get 9 plantains. So this is an interesting question that will involve some multiplication, so it's amazing, right? Every time I buy 3, I have to pay $2. So if I buy 9, that's 3 of them, right? So that's $6. So two times 3, right? So that's something that you can use multiplication and try to like engage them in real life with real life examples. Another thing would be to talk about an arrangement, right? So maybe you went, some grocery stores, they arrange the produce really beautifully, but they might arrange it in an array, right? Where you have, let's say, what can I think of right now? Maybe you have oranges or something, and maybe you have like columns and rows of oranges, right? So maybe going this way for the rows, it's like 4 rows or something, and maybe there's 5 columns. Then you can say, oh, how many oranges are there? And then if they start to count, you're like, no, why don't we use what we've learned about multiplication recently, right? And then you can engage them and get them to use it in real life examples. Another thing would be if you're estimating like your total gas payment or something. Maybe you're told that you're gonna pay maybe $2 for each whatever the kind of payment is. You can use that as a problem. So if we're filling the tank up until this point, then how much are we going to pay? What's the estimate? Now, even if they haven't, because most of them aren't whole dollar amounts, right? So even if they haven't worked on decimals, you can round it, right? If it's 199, or sorry, if it's like 399 or 349 or something, they can just round it to like $4 and use that or something like that. Okay, the next thing is if you're traveling, total time for your trip. So maybe you can go 50 miles per hour, and maybe you know the distance that you're traveling, right? You can help them to figure out kind of um, or I should, since we're doing multiplications, because that would be division. But if you were doing multiplication, you could say, okay, we're going 50 miles per hour and we're going to be on this for maybe half an hour or something like that. Or like we're going to be on here for 2 hours. So 50 miles per hour at 2 hours, how far can we go in that distance? That is multiplication. Okay, and then calculating tips. This is 100% multiplication, right? 50% of our bill. If our bill is $40, it's 0.5 times 40. But that's really 5 times 4, which is 20, but then you just have to figure out the decimal place. So it's all these basic facts, again, that you're working with, even when you're working with these decimals. It's still the same basic facts that you're using. So these are real life examples for you to bring multiplication to life and make it more engaging for them so they can remember it long term. All right, the next thing I'll say, this is my favorite, It's using multiplication and the distributive property for more complex multiplication or more complex math. Now, in this example I have here, I created this visual where it's basically dish the calculator. So we don't need calculators a lot if we can learn to use the basic facts that we know and use them to do more interesting things. So in this example, I have 67 times 33. Now, most people's instinct would be to say, where's my calculator? Let me calculate this, right? But we don't need to do that because we know some basic math facts. We know 6 times 3 and we know 7 times 3 because that's what this whole thing is about, right? Memorizing the basic facts. So 6 times 3 is 18 and 7 times 3 is 21. That's all we need to know. So now that we've come here, so how do we figure this out? We start with the fact that 33 is made up of 30 and 3. So if I'm going to multiply 67 by 33, I'm technically going to multiply 67 by 30, and then I'm going to add that to what 67 by 3. Okay, I can separate the 3 and the 30. Now let's do 67 times 3 first. Okay, now if I do 67 times 3, I know 67, I can break that up. It's made up of 60 and 7. So 60 times 3, that's 6 times 3 is 18. So 60 times 3 is 180. 7 times 3 is 21. So 67 times 3 is 180 plus 21, which is 201. Okay, now that I know that, guess what? I know 67 times 30. Why? Because 3 and 30 are related. Okay, 30 is just 10 times 3. So 67 times 30 would be that 201 times 10. So it's 2010. Now, 67 times 33 would just be the sum of 2010 and 201. Now, it might seem complicated, but if you do this enough, you'll be so quick at mental math, you can do this in your head without having to actually calculate it. Now, when I was solving this, I solved it in my head and I actually didn't have to write it down because I knew those basic facts, 6 times 3 and 7 times 3. All of those were the only things I needed to be able to figure this out. So this is super cool and it's an application of the distributive property, right? Distributive property basically is like we can break these apart and do them in steps, right? Instead of doing let's say 5 times 55, I can do 5 times 50 and add that to 5 times 5. So break it apart and multiply and then add it together. That's basically it. And help them to do this. So what happens is that they're thinking, their brains are going to be working and they're going to be using those basic facts that they know, and it's going to solidify it and just allow for longer term retention. All right. So I'm coming to the end of this webinar. I'm like uh, excited that I've been able to share these resources with you. So these are links just to go over them. Some online platforms that I mentioned, Math Fact Lab. It's about $15 a year for 5 children. So it's super affordable. Times Tables Rockstars, that's about $12 a year for 3 children. GimKit is free if you have a limited number of students, but if you wanted to add more and have like more students, then you have to pay a fee. But it's generally free. It's not, and the number of students is like 5 or something like that, which is good, especially if you're doing it at home. Multiplication trainer, the link is also there. It's free at mathisfun.com. Online Jeopardy Labs is also free, like I mentioned. All right. And then some of my resources. So I have free flashcards and worksheets for multiplication practice. I also have a link to a Jeopardy game that I created with multiplication practice and then a GimKit practice thing that I created. So I have those 2 resources that if you email me at teachernascas, and it's right there on the screen.com, at gmail.com, can give you access, or if you look, I'm hoping to put it in the description or the bio, depending on which platform you're using to watch this. I also have a summer 2024 multiplication mastery bootcamp that will be paid. You would have to pay for. So if you're interested in that, it's going to be super fun. We're going to be filling it with a lot of GimKit practice and with kids competing against each other and everything, it's going to be awesome. So if you would really love your child to get that mastery in a fun, stress-free environment, then I would encourage you to sign up for my boot. All right. So if you want to get in touch with me, these are some ways that you can get in touch with me. If you're looking for a math tutor for your child, then my tutoring website is up there. You can see that it's right there. On Instagram, you can reach out to me. You can DM me on Instagram. My sort of name on Instagram is Math Tutoring That Works. So you can send me a message there. On YouTube, I'm Master Middle School Math. On Facebook, I'm Math Meets Mastery. And my email, again, is teachernascas@gmail.com. I know it's so many different names. As I was writing it down, I was like, I may need to streamline this a little bit more, but that's what I have for now. Again, I'm Nana, and I'm a middle school math teacher and tutor. I love and enjoy math and engaging kids, and I'm just so grateful that you took the time to listen to this webinar. Thank you, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.